Welcome to your Essential Business Briefing. I'm Stephen Carroll. Coming up, what does Joe Biden in the White House mean for businesses in America and the rest of the world? We'll speak to the founder of a Philadelphia craft brewery about the next 4 years and how they're surviving during the pandemic. Plus, the big policy battles ahead in Washington, what business groups are hoping to get on the agenda as the president-elect prepares to take power. Now, in the end, it was the state of Pennsylvania that gave Joe Biden his victory in the US presidential election. People spilled onto the streets of Philadelphia to celebrate the Democratic candidate's win. Exit polls found that the economy was one of the biggest issues for voters, as more than 11 million people in the US are still out of work. Small businesses will be key to the economic recovery, so let's speak now to a man who runs one. Trevor Hayward is the co-founder of the craft brewer Evil Genius Beer Company based in Philadelphia. Trevor, thanks for being with us. We saw the scenes of where you are, of people out celebrating those election results. Do you share the future, the optimism those people have about the future?
I sure do. This has been a very rough year, and I think that a new government will hopefully offer some optimism to everybody.
Give us a flavour of what's happened to your business over the past few months. How have you been affected by the pandemic?
Sure. So back in March, we were kind of shut down almost entirely for a few weeks, and very slowly we've been able to open. It meant we had to furlough a lot of staff. It was obviously a very difficult year for a lot of people, but the whole restaurant industry here has been greatly affected, as it has been obviously everywhere else around the world also. So it's been a pretty tough year, absolutely.
And as things have reopened up, have you been able to make changes in your business to adapt to the restrictions that you're working under?
Yeah, so it's obviously made a lot of changes. We're only allowed to have 4 people at a table when they're inside and only 6 when they're outside. Everyone has to be seated when they're at a table as well. So we've adapted. We put up barriers. We have face masks and face shields for all of our staff, and a lot of new sanitation procedures as well.
Surely when you look at this year financially, you must be expecting things to be pretty different compared to 2019. Do you have a projection of how much your earnings will be down?
Oh, we're probably going to be down somewhere close to 40 to 50%. It was pretty impactful in where budgets were expected to be and where they ended up.
Have you been able to avail of any state or federal support for your business?
Yeah, so the CARES Act that was passed here in April is something we were able to take advantage of, and allowed us to rehire a lot of our staff more quickly than we maybe otherwise would have been able to. So that was obviously helpful. But since that first round of stimulus, there hasn't really been anything from government-wise for us.
And are you hopeful now that, you know, with a new president in place, that there will be more help for businesses?
I do, in the sense that I think that a lot of the politicians were kind of punting until after the election. So I'm kind of hoping either during this lame duck session or when the inauguration happens in January, soon after that, that there is another round of stimulus to help all kinds of different businesses, not just mine.
So what do you need? I mean, what's the most important measure that you would want those policymakers to focus on?
I mean, I think especially for small businesses and businesses even smaller than myself, it's trying to help make sure that they're able to stay open and help them with maybe utilities or things like that, or rent. Because that's been a big thing for a lot of businesses this year, is that they're unable to make their rent payments because they're not making revenue.
When you look, I'm sure you're speaking to people running businesses. You know, you're from Ireland like I am, and I think sure you're speaking to people there who are running businesses too. Do you see that there's been better support elsewhere for small businesses like yours than what you're experiencing?
Yeah, I mean, Ireland's a great example where they actually have put in place something that is ongoing for businesses. Whereas what's happened here in the States was kind of a one drop back in April, and there hasn't really been anything since then.
Does the new president actually change anything for you when you run a business? Do you kind of think like it's not really relevant? It's much more relevant whether people want to come and drink my beer?
Well, this one might be more relevant, but in general, I would agree that it's probably not all that relevant because the president himself doesn't set tax policy. That's Congress. And so it's really about them all working together. But I agree with you. It's more about, I care more about people being able to come and drink the beer.
You're known, your company, for very inventive titles for beers. Have you got any political ones timed to this season?
We tend not to. We tend to stay away from politics, but we do have a new beer coming out shortly, which is called "I Miss Precedented Times."
I think we all do. Trevor Hayward from the Evil Genius Beer Company. Thank you very much for joining us from Philadelphia. Now, almost 3/4 of small businesses in the United States say they've been hurt by the pandemic. A survey for the US Census Bureau found that 30% of small firms had suffered what they call a large negative effect. That figure rises to around 60% for companies operating in the entertainment and hospitality industries. While a survey by Goldman Sachs found that more than half of small business owners had stopped paying themselves to keep their businesses afloat. Let's get a broader view now of how the business community is feeling about this. We can speak to John Denton, who is the Secretary General of the International Chamber of Commerce, which represents 48 million companies around the world, including in the United States. John, thanks for being with us. Can I start, first of all, in the US? Look, it's clear the pandemic has hurt many small businesses there as much as anywhere else. What needs to be done on a policy basis now to be able to help those businesses?
Just one thing to be very clear of, particularly with your viewers. When we talk about small businesses, even in the US, they actually make up almost 80% of the actual real economy. So in the US alone, we're talking about 30 million small businesses. So this is a very big part of the US economy and actually one of the most important employers. And let's be also very clear here, they are hurting and they continue to hurt. One of the other problems we're seeing, of course, is that as businesses hang on, then collapse, the likelihood of them reopening is becoming less and less. So what they need, what we are arguing for, is more support to enable them to stay open, and we also need a global solution as well to continue to allow them to continue to trade. What is pretty clear, I think, from the evidence to date, is that monetary policy in the US has gone as far as it can. There really does need to be a very significant fiscal intervention. And that's going to require the political establishment to get its act together to ensure that there's a significant fiscal intervention as quickly as possible. By the way, we can't wait 2 months. More businesses will go out of business, more jobs will be lost, and more businesses will not reopen. So this activity, this focus on actually getting a deal, if I could, across the aisle, which actually enables a fiscal package to be delivered into the arms and into the very willing requirements of small business in the US is there now. It's a clear and present issue that must be dealt with.
So in that stimulus package then, what's the key measure that will help to save businesses and save jobs? What's the most important thing that businesses need now?
Working capital. They need access to support working capital. A classic example, frankly, from what we're seeing, and it's not just in the US, but it's a critical issue. And actually, if they could help fix this problem, it actually has a global impact as well. You know, most working capital for businesses actually rely on what's called trade finance. And we've seen the trade finance, the actual access to it is becoming limited. So what's happening is that in order to finance themselves, the actual costs are going up, but also the supply is going down. So you've got a crunching happen on trade finance and you've got an increase in the price. It's absolutely crazy. So what we actually need to do is to have governments intervene to support access to trade finance. They need to actually be ensuring that their credit insurance agencies have access to funds. There should be some direct stimulus there to support that as well. And by the way, the reason it's so crazy is that trade finance and providing trade finance is actually one of the lowest risk areas. It's actually a very successful and very powerful way of actually bringing liquidity back into the market. And if you get trade finance operating in the US, which enables SMEs and other businesses to function again, what you're also doing is enabling them to export. But to actually enable others to import their goods, you actually need to fix this trade finance issue on a global basis, which is why, for example, we at the ICC are arguing at the G20 level that there actually needs to be clear and direct intervention to support creating the availability of up to $2 trillion to enable trade flows to go back to where they were before the pandemic. At the moment, we're way, way short of that. But if we were able to do that, and if the US was able to participate in leadership on that, not only would it provide clear liquidity and support for working capital to enable SMEs and micro SMEs in the US to continue to trade and to function, it actually does create a global momentum, which will actually help trading on a global basis, which is good for the US and good for all other nations as well. So that's a key area. And we can't wait till the end of January for this to happen. The G20 is happening along the way. The US needs to be able to support this, and we actually need to get this direct intervention. And I do know that the Bretton Woods institutions are actually very supportive of this as well, the IMF and the World Bank, because we've been arguing and talking to them about this.
So that's the big issue that should be dealt with in Washington, in your view. What about trade relations? Are you optimistic under Joe Biden that there could be an improvement in trade relations globally that will help to lift businesses as well?
Look, from our perspective, the most important thing is to make certain that people understand that trade is actually a positive. We argue for make trade work for people and planet. We would want any incoming US administration, we would want all governments to understand the importance of that, because the problem we're seeing is that there are parts of the global community, parts of the US community in particular, who feel their lot has been made worse because of trade. It's not correct, but we need to actually work doubly to ensure that there's actually domestic support for the global trading environment, domestic support for open economies, domestic support for better bilateral relations as well, and domestic support for global rules that enable clear and transparent guidance for companies about how they trade, and an accountable trading system as well. And we also need to make certain that the trading system itself, as encapsulated in the WTO, is made relevant in the 21st century. We would hope that any government around the world would see the benefit in that. But at the moment, the only way they see the benefit is we can also convince the people that this is actually a positive and a net public good. So we'll be working doubly hard to ensure that that's the better proposition that comes out of the US as we go into 2021.
John Denton from the International Chamber of Commerce, thank you very much for speaking to us. Well, that's it from us for now, but you can watch back all of our previous shows on our website, france24.com. And we're on social media for all your comments and questions. Until next time, thanks for watching.